Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Martina Droth. I am the Deputy Director and Chief Curator of the Yale Center for British Art. We are a museum in New Haven, Connecticut, in the USA on the East Coast. And in case you're wondering why an American museum is presenting on Art UK, well, it's by virtue of us having the largest collection of British art outside of Britain. And I'm really delighted to be here and to give you an introduction to the museum, to our collections, and to some of the work that we're doing. So the Yale Center for British Art, which from here I'm going to call the YCBA, is one of two art museums on the Yale University campus. It was founded by Paul Mellon, who lived 1907 to 1999. He was a graduate of Yale University and gifted his collection of British art and the museum to the university. And you can see in the slide, you can see the museum on Chapel Street in downtown New Haven. It was designed by the architect Louis Kahn, who died in 1974, just before the building opened a few years later. So we opened our doors in 1977. And it's his last great building right across the street from the art gallery, which you can see to the left of the picture across the street. You can't see the Louis Kahn part, which is a little bit off the picture, but we have the earliest museum by Louis Kahn and the last museum by Louis Kahn on the campus. And people come here as much for the architecture as they do for the collection. Show you some images. The building is designed, it's a sort of rectangular shape, and it's designed around two courts. You see here the entrance court and how you come in off the street into the building. And I think you can see from the image that, you know, we've got light filtering in from above through the skylights, which is sort of an integral part of the design of the building. And here's the other court on the other side of the building. Also top lit, and you can see through those openings at the top. Those are the windows on the roof that allow light to come in. And you can also maybe just start to get a sense of how porous the building is, in a sense, in terms of openings onto the court, so that from different vantage points, you can see different parts of the building, and you can really feel you're in the space and know where you are, because you can always look across, you can look down. And you can look outside because there are large windows onto the street as well. And maybe you can get a sense that light plays a really important role in the experience of the galleries. So I want to give a little bit of history. Paul Mellon was the son and heir of Andrew W. Mellon, who the banker and the art collector, whose great gift to the nation was the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., a gift that actually Paul Mellon finished because Andrew died before that happened. So Paul Mellon, as I said, studied at Yale. And when he finished his studies here, he did a second degree at the University of Cambridge. And he spent a lot of time in Britain and began to collect British art in the 1930s. And this painting by George Stubbs is the first work that he acquired in 1936. It's a portrait of a thoroughbred. And in many ways, it's very symbolic of the collection because, well, Paul Mellon was a passionate owner and breeder of thoroughbreds. And within the collection, the horse and all of the associated themes like hunting, racing, and also sort of other threads that maybe you don't immediately think of, like the country house, the animals that were hunted, the landscapes, the people, the portraits of the people who owned the horses. Those are some of the really major thematic strands of the collection. So if we go back to the library court, you can begin to see how this plays out in the galleries and in the kinds of paintings that we show. The pair of paintings that you see at the top are also by George Stubbs. They're the largest paintings in the collection. They measure some 9 by 11 feet and originally hung in the Mayfair townhouse of Lord Rockingham, who was not only a politician, but also a thoroughbred owner and one of Britain's wealthiest peers in the mid-18th century. So you get a sense of how politics and horses come together. And underneath on the lower register of the wall, you can see a series of 4 paintings, also by Stubbs, that represent a kind of a narrative of a hunt, like a sequence of different events happening as a shooting party goes out. And, you know, these paintings they're very much symptomatic of Paul Mellon's interests, but they also exemplify the central place of sporting arts, the horse, hunting in British art. Artists like Stubbs and James Ward, whom we also represent very richly in the collections, and we have many paintings, including horse portraits by James Ward and a very substantial collection of works on paper. And artists like this made some of the most innovative and compelling and socially complex works of the 18th century, even though as a genre, horse portraits, animal paintings, tend to be perceived as a lower status as history paintings or portraits of people. And Stubbs's own biography reflects this, because as an animal painter, he was excluded from full Royal Academy membership. And the scholarship on British art to an extent does too, although that's changing. But animal paintings are often overlooked. And some of the strategic symbolism of the horse is also underplayed, and yet it played such an important role in aristocratic identity formation and politics. We were so pleased recently to add to our collection by way of a gift, a painting by the New York-based British painter Cecily Brown. And it's one of a whole group of paintings that she made originally for Blenheim Palace, where she had an artist residency. And Blenheim Palace has a collection of paintings that have some overlaps and affinities with our own. They also have paintings by Reynolds and by George Stubbs. And so this painting by Cecily Brown speaks really well to our collection. I don't know if you can make it out, but it depicts a sort of, or vividly reimagines a hunting scene. And as she was at Blenheim, she was thinking about that history, the trappings of the aristocracy, taking the hunt as a symbol of Britishness and elite culture, while making these contemporary responses and much more elusive and ambiguous paintings, almost verging on the abstract. And I think this is a good example of how we can build on our founding collections with contemporary art in a way that also provides new inflection points on the historical works. And the historical works really remain very foundational. They're really still the core of our holdings, even though we have built the collection up over the years. Let me show you some of our other gallery spaces and how we display our collections. And you're seeing here the 4th floor of the building. And as I mentioned, the roof consists of skylights, so it's top lit galleries. And also the galleries kind of wrap around the 2 courts. And you can see here these window openings on the interior of the building, where you can look down onto the entrance court, and you can also look across into the other galleries. So you always can orient yourself, and you can make these connections between and amongst different things that are on display. One way to describe the collection, or one aspect of it, is that we do have many works that you would expect to see when you think of a Centre for British Art, when you think of the 18th and 19th century in British art. And here you can see a number of paintings by Turner. We have a really important Turner collection, paintings as well as works on paper. And we have very many portraits by artists like Gainsborough, and there's a Tilly Kettle here as well. And you can maybe just make out Joseph Wright of Derby in the background. There are also some more surprising elements within the collection, and particularly that it has a very international dimension to it, both in terms of the artists that we represent, those who came to Britain from elsewhere, and those who went from Britain, who traveled and made their careers elsewhere, and also in terms of subjects and places that are depicted. And you can see on this slide on the left a portrait by Tilly Kettle of Shaju-ud-Dowlah, the Nawab of Oudh, that was painted in 1772 by an artist who made his career in southern India and built a client base, not only of East India Company officials, but also of local Indian rulers. And India and other places that were formerly part of the British Empire represent very strong threads in the collection. So there is a global reach, and there are also very complicated histories and legacies embedded in the collection. While that story can only be told in limited ways or in certain ways within the paintings and sculpture collection, which is what we show on the 4th floor, which is too bright for light-sensitive materials, and yet those kind of global narratives are represented in very deep and rich ways in the collection if we consider it as a totality. So although not represented on the Art UK website, there are many other materials that are available on our own website collection catalog. So paintings and sculpture is perhaps the most visible and best known part of our collection, but it represents quite a small percentage of the totality. And I want to give you some numbers to put to that. So there are around 2,000 paintings in the collection and around 250 sculptures. There are some 20,000 drawings and watercolors. And just showing you one example of a fabulous work that we recently acquired. There are some 40,000 prints of all media and across all periods, and some 35,000 rare books, manuscripts, atlases, maps, globes, and all kinds of ephemera that represent collectively a really rich visual culture of Britain. And these collections, together with our reference library, our archives, makes the YCBA a really exceptional resource for the study of British art and culture from about the 15th century to the present. So as a public museum, we exhibit those collections. They also underpin our role as a research center that seeks to provide a resource for scholarship and for the field. So we have a program for visiting scholars, for visiting artists and visiting curators who can apply to come here on paid residencies. And we have this study room, which was designed as to be part of the fabric of the building. And here, people can consult works on paper, the archives, the rare books. And I want to make clear that any member of the public can come and make an appointment and request to view any work. So you don't have to be affiliated to a university, you don't have to have any special credentials. All are welcome. And that's really part of our mission. And of course, in recognition of the fact that not everybody can travel to New Haven, we're also very committed to digitizing our collections and making everything available online. So research is also a responsibility that we naturally take on as a museum. And we're very aware of the need to take a critical look, certainly at the collections themselves, but also at how we use them and how we interpret them. Researching and understanding our own collections and making that research transparent is one of our ongoing goals. And of course, like many museums with historical collections, there are works that speak to colonial histories and to histories of violence and oppression. And we want to be thoughtful in how we show them, what we learn about them, and what we show and tell on our walls. And also how to bring different voices to bear on our thinking and our approach to objects. And that means collaborating both internally in engaging across our own staffs with our conservators, our educators, our programming teams alongside the curators, and also people outside of the museum. And I want to tell you just a little bit about one project that we undertook with some of those questions and criteria in mind, which was an examination of this painting that I'm showing here, which depicts Elihu Yale. And that's not a coincidence. He is the namesake of Yale University. And he is shown here with members of his family and an enslaved child. And as you can imagine, alone by the fact that he is the namesake and the benefactor of the university, for that reason alone, this painting has had a lot of attention over the years. And it's one of several depictions of Elihu Yale that the university collected. This was never owned. by Paul Mellon. It was nonetheless the first painting that was accessioned to the collection in 1970, even before the museum opened. And for a very long time, and this is evident in the records, the child at the right of the painting was completely overlooked, as though invisible. But that figure does represent an enslaved child wearing a metal collar around the neck. And it's all the more poignant because you can see in the background a group of children that belong to the LIU Yale family who are playing and are having a very different experience of childhood. This painting has sort of come in and out of public attention over the years, and it came up again in the summer of 2020. And our then newly arrived new director, Courtney J. Martin, established an interdepartmental working group to undertake the study of the painting so that we would know more about it and could share that knowledge with the public because there was so much interest to know more about the painting. And that included also, for the first time, a full technical analysis. So here you can see the painting as it hung on the wall. In fact, it hung on the wall since 2016 in this way. And in order to study it, we took it off view, and we actually left the wall blank for a period of time with just a text panel to signal what we were doing in the background. And this happened during the course of the pandemic when we were closed, we were open, we were closed, we were open. So people could sort of see glimpses of what we were doing. And then for a period of time, we replaced the painting with a work that was made in direct response to it by the artist Titus Kaphar in 2016. And Titus Kaphar is a Yale MFA, very active artist in the New Haven community. And he called this painting Enough About You. And perhaps you can make out that, it's a full-size replica of the group portrait, but has crumpled up LIU Yale's family and really put the focus on the child, which for so many centuries had been ignored. And the working group, the research group, our staff colleagues, made the decision not to hang the two paintings together, but really to replace the historical painting with the contemporary one, which I thought was a really great decision. And there was a panel alongside that explained the work we were undertaking to understand the portrait better. And then my colleagues published this incredible feature on the website that's now available for anyone to read. And again, it's part of our goal to be transparent about our collection, to learn more about it, and to make that information available to the public. Many museums and institutions have, of course, begun to make a commitment to study the histories and identities of unnamed individuals. And here is another example of a painting with a child that for a very long time was unnamed. But this cumulative effort taking place in lots of different institutions and museums, it's very interesting because it's allowing us to kind of share work and information together, and had a very beneficial effect for us. We were contacted out of the blue by an archivist in the West Sussex Record Office who found a baptismal record, and through some archival sleuthing, eventually the trail led back to our painting. And we were able to find the child recorded in Joshua Reynolds' Sitter's book, to identify him and to learn something new about his life. And that story is now also on our website. It was written by one of our graduate students, Victoria Hepburn. So these are just some examples of the work that maybe isn't so visible, but that we're committed to doing within the museum, and always to make that work available for free to the public. So I want to just spend sort of the final part of this talk to share with you a few highlights from our collection, which are all on Art UK, so that you can find these works again, but to talk a little bit about some of the sort of key works in the collection. Beginning again here, going back to George Stubbs and his zebra painting of 1763. So this painting depicts a female Cape Mountain zebra. It's so carefully painted that the species can be identified. And this animal was brought to London from Africa in 1762 as a royal gift. And it was transported on a British warship that was engaged in an imperialist mission on the other side of the globe. So again, sort of speaking to a very complicated history. And you see the zebra standing in a woodland. And it's so interesting because the elements in this painting, the zebra and the landscape, are very familiar and recognizable visual iconographies, but they're placed into this juxtaposition that's incredibly jarring. And I think that it makes it such a thought-provoking painting that in many ways opens the door to the collection and to noticing all kinds of other dislocations and disorientations, and gets us to think about place and identity in British art. We have a really important collection of works by John Constable. And of course, we sort of take Constable for granted in a way as germane to the history of landscape painting and the development of landscape painting in the 19th century. But it's important to us because he has had so much less exposure in the USA and is much less familiar as an artist, unlike Turner, for instance. And we are fortunate to have this full-size, incredible sort of sketch, as well as this so-called 6-footer. And these works are supported by a really extensive collection of other paintings, sketches, especially the cloud studies, and also a large collection of works on paper. I've already mentioned Turner, but I wanted to come back to these paintings because they're such key anchors in our collection. This is the Dort, and what I love about this painting, it's very large, has this incredible luminosity, and it hangs next to a window. So it gets you to think about light and maybe to sort of notice the building and the light that's coming into it as you're in the galleries. So we have a really important Turner collection. We have some earlier works by Turner, such as this, and then also some of those later, more impressionistic works on paper, including some of these incredibly sort of spontaneous impressionistic seascapes that he made in the 1840s. This work is one of our most often requested works for loan. It's by Joanna Boyce Wells, who was associated with Pre-Raphaelites. And it's a portrait of Fanny Eaton, who has become sort of quite a well-known figure in history of Pre-Raphaelite art. She worked as a model for some of the most famous Pre-Raphaelite painters. And she often appears in narrative paintings, genre paintings. But what's so special about our work is that this is a rare portrait of Fanny Eaton herself as an autonomous figure. Our 20th century collections, they're much less concentrated in terms of sort of quantity, but we have these pockets of really great strength and incredible holdings. And one of them is works by Gwen John, an artist that I greatly admire. We have some 40 works by this artist. And interestingly, we're starting to see loans for these works being much more frequently requested. And much more attention is being paid to this artist with a new kind of scholarly apparatus around her that's moving away from some of those, some of the biographical details that have so long dominated her. So I think over the coming years, we're going to see Gwen John's work and our understanding of it really come into a new light. As I noted earlier, our collection reaches into the present day. This is a sculpture that we were fortunate to acquire a few years ago by Yinka Shonibare, an artist that we've worked with and shown. And he made this work on commission for us to be part of an exhibition that we did a few years ago about the role of women in the history of the monarchy. And I'm so delighted that we were then able to acquire it. And again, this is an artist who reflects on the history of British art and the history of Britain, and makes work that reflects on those histories in new ways and gives us new ways to think about it. And finally, I want to show you a more recent acquisition that we made, and how we displayed it in our galleries. We most often show our collection chronologically or loosely chronologically, but sometimes we make these interruptions, like I showed you with Cecily Brown's painting in the library court, and here in our 4th floor portrait galleries. So we initially borrowed this painting by Kehinde Wiley to complement a temporary exhibition curated by Hilton Als of works by Lynette Yiadom Boyachy. But then we're able to acquire it. And in fact, this was our first co-acquisition with the Yale University Art Gallery. So we share this painting, and sometimes it's on view at the gallery, and sometimes it's on view with us. And again, like Cecily Brown, this is an important work by an artist who cites historical sources and talks about how influential historical paintings were to his practice. And here he has copied landscape elements from a 1763 painting by George Romney, which is in the Tate collection. So you can look it up on Art UK. But he has replaced the figure of Jacob Morland with the figure of Yiadom Boyachy, who is a fellow Black artist and close friend of Kehinde Wiley's. So I think you can see that there are many layers to this painting. And yet alone the act of substitution, you know, without really knowing anything else, you could walk into these galleries and notice that, and hopefully get viewers to think about matters of race, class, gender, and colonialism as they relate to these historical grand manner portraits that surrounded it. So I hope this has given you some insights into the collection and into the kind of work that we do, as well as being on Art UK. You know, nearly all of our paintings and sculptures are on Art UK. Our collection is also fully online, much of it digitized. So I invite you to explore further on our website. And of course, if you can come to New Haven, we would be delighted if you come and visit us. Thank you so much, and for tuning in. Goodbye, everyone.